Hi everyone, my name is Sophie and today I'm here with Chris Chambers. He is a professor at the University of Groningen and he teaches courses in the field of journalism. And the reason why he's here today is because we see that a lot of CIS students have an interest in the field of journalism, and we thought it would be great to have an insider's perspective on journalism as a field and what it's actually like to be a journalist. Chris, I wanted to welcome you here and thank you for the opportunity to do this interview with us. So then I actually wanted to start off. Could you maybe tell us a bit more about yourself, where you are at the moment?
About myself at the moment, how old am I? I'm at that age where I forget my age. I'm 57 now. I've been involved in journalism since 1991, so 31 years. I must say these days a lion's share of what I do is the actual teaching, which is not what I anticipated at all. I still do some journalism, I do writing, I do the occasional feature, but also I have the last 3 years, I sort of took time out from the journalism aspect of things to write a book, and the book is just finished, it's just been published, so that's that's a novel.
Okay, very nice. So I actually read that you studied biology. I think in London it was. And then I was immediately intrigued because I thought, how do you make such a switch from biology to journalism? Because it's not really like a logical path, right?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because in my day, media studies didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so I think it was important to go to university and to get that experience. I studied biology because it was the thing that interested me the most, being with animals. I grew up in the countryside and that was always something that fascinated me. And it was to get away to London and just experience something. Whether I thought at that age that I was going to carry on down that path, I'm not sure. It was just going to university and experiencing something.
Yeah.
And what I found out later in journalism, I can't remember any of my colleagues that studied journalism. Masters, yes, that's what I ended up doing.
Yeah.
But then they all did history or English or biology or law, anything at all. You don't need, in those days anyway, to have been doing an academic journalistic path in order to become a journalist. But it was also, it didn't exist.
Right.
So, I mean, how could you there were no schools for journalism as far as I know. You could do a master's, but even doing the master's, which I did when I left university when I was 21, 22, did lots of other things after that. And then it wasn't until I was 26 that the sort of age where I was thinking, okay, I do need to settle down.
Yeah.
In the sense of find a career path, and I'd done a few things at university involving writing.
Okay.
And it was always in the back of my mind that that's perhaps what I would do. And I had written for a couple of magazines, but very simple local magazines.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so 5 years after university, after having done quite a lot of theatre, after living in France, renovating a house for 2 years, and a few other things in between, which I think is good. There's something that I would suggest to all of you. Just because you're doing something at university, that does not restrict you in any way of what your career path is going to be. There's a wonderful statue outside in the courtyard. The thing that looks like a big piece of chewing gum.
Yeah.
That's been stretched out. It says non scholae sed vitae on it, which is Latin for university teaching, learning is for life. Okay, it's about learning experiences, and I think that's important about university. And I don't think there are that many people that know at your age that know exactly what you want to do, and I think that's a good thing. University is about experimenting and experiencing and finding very gradually your own path. It doesn't matter what degree you're doing, unless it's medicine or perhaps law or something like that. I think most degrees just give you a lesson in life, I hope.
Yeah. So you know that in journalism there are lots of fields that you can report on, and I wanted to know what is for you personally your field of interest and why would that be?
Yeah, it took me quite a long time to really understand what really ticked all the boxes for me. I started off, I think as most people do, as a general news reporter. And I did that for, I guess, about 5 years. I started at the BBC, and then I went to the national BBC in London as a general reporter. I was at LBC as well, of course. That's one of the things in journalism. There are so many different things that you can do, and what I think is important also is to recognise that if at any moment you're thinking in the journalistic path that you're taking, I'm not finding this interesting. There are so many other aspects to journalism that you can try, and that's what I did. And I started in news, and I recognised relatively early on that I wasn't so interested in the hard news. I like the fluffy stories. I love the human contact stories, and about just humans doing things. And I like that interaction. So it wasn't more about, to be honest, how people thought about something, which for me was always sort of quite abstract. I liked seeing people doing things, and I recognised that quite early on. And I think there was a moment for me when I realised hard news, absolutely not. I was living I was living actually with my mother in quite a small village near the city where I was working at BBC Radio Devon, and it was my day off, and there was a helicopter just keep on circling and circling and circling over the village. And it was a nice day, and I was in the garden reading a book. And if I was a hard news person, I would have been so inquisitive. I would have wanted to know what that helicopter was doing. But I had no interest in it whatsoever. And I saw in the news that evening that the gun shop had been raided, had been burgled, and it was, the police were there and everything. So, it was actually a news story,
Yeah.
but it just didn't do anything for me at all. And it was at that moment I thought, okay, I need to probably get away from this. So gradually I went into features, and since then, for more than 25 years, I've been in features, because I enjoy it. I enjoy the interaction,
Yeah.
and I enjoy meeting people, going out. You were talking about field journalism. That's very much what I've done. I've gone out into the field and interviewed people. I do tell my students, you have to be careful with that. People assume as a journalist you just automatically go out reporting, but it's not the case. The majority of journalists stay inside in front of a computer. All the information is coming to them, which they just then digest and then regurgitate in a different form. I did do that as well, and I recognised it wasn't for me. There will be some people that recognise it is for them. But I think what's nice with journalism, over time you can gradually understand what makes you tick, what you enjoy, and there are the possibilities to be able to do the things you enjoy, and to start working on aspects of journalism that really interest you.
Okay, interesting. So you just said that you started, I think, at the BBC 4 in 1991.
I started at BBC Radio Devon in 1992, because I finished I did a master's,
Yeah.
and from that I did an internship at BBC Radio Devon, which was the provincial BBC radio station.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where I started. I did the internship and they gave me a job. I stayed there for 2 years and then I moved back to London. Went to LBC, London Broadcasting Company, as a reporter, eventually becoming the editor of the breakfast news programme, which I didn't like at all. But then I went to BBC Radio Devon, BBC Radio 4, and that's where I was able to do all the features. It's great fun.
Very good. Yeah, so then I also read, after you went to London, you actually moved to the Netherlands, and then you also worked for a Dutch company. So you've been in touch with a lot of different media, but what media would you say is the most optimal for journalism?
Ooh. I don't think there is one. I think every aspect of every media that you can use for the journalistic process has its failings, but it has its positive sides. I don't think you can choose one over the other. What I will say from experience, I don't think it's good for journalism and for the individual to have to do two things at once, which is what a lot of journalists are being asked to do these days.
Yeah.
Let's say you go out to do a story and you have to write about it as well as do the camera work, do something visual from it. It means you're not concentrating 100% on one aspect of journalism. Writing, observing, seeing things, interpreting what you see, facts, and all of those things in order to put on paper is a very different form of bringing the information to the individual than working from video, doing a visual work. And combining the two, I think it's going to dilute each. But that said, that's what a lot of journalists are now having to do, which I think is maybe a problem with the quality of journalism. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
What I will say.
Yeah. No.
sorry
Please.
to butt in there.
Yeah.
It depends on what you feel. It's what you feel as a journalist. Again, you can experiment. You can write. You can work behind the camera. You can do audio. It's what feels right for you, and I think you know instinctively. I would suggest try them all out and see what it's like.
Yeah. Thank you. Why do you think journalism is relevant in contemporary society?
Oh, not in just contemporary society. I mean, journalism is it's one of the pillars of society. I mean, in contemporary society, just as it was 100 years ago, without good journalism, I think society, a democratic society, can easily collapse. I'm not saying it would collapse, but there's more. It would be easier because if you don't hold people to account, if people in their country, in their society, don't know what's going on around them, well, they can't do anything about it.
Yep.
And there are plenty of people in this world, as I'm sure you know, that will take advantage of those situations. They crave, they need power. It's what makes them tick. It's what makes them human. And they will take as much of it as they possibly can. And without journalism, without journalists to push them back into their place and to hold them to account and to tell everybody, hey, look what this person is doing, then we've got serious problems.
Yeah.
But that's always been the case. I mean, the problem now with contemporary society, of course, is and there's so much information out there.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's more important than ever to have good journalists that really know what they're doing. And I've spoken about this with my students. Is it important to study journalism? And actually, I would say yes. I think it is. It's interesting from my experience doing my master's, from what I can remember, it was all about how how to just going out and just getting the information, the practical side of being a journalist. We had to look at the legal aspects as well, what you could and couldn't do. But there was never looking at the philosophical aspect of being a journalist, what it means, the integrity that you need, and the sense of responsibility that you need. And I remember I never really, to be honest, thought about those things in any depth until I started teaching it. And then suddenly everything, it became clear to me why I do the things I do as a journalist, because it was so instinctive, especially in those days. Things have changed so much with social media and the internet. There's so much information out there, written by God knows who. Who can you trust? There was always a sense, perhaps not quite right, that you could trust journalists, because why wouldn't you trust journalists? Now, well, you don't know who is a journalist, because you don't know where the information is coming from. And so I do think, and I say to the students as well, these days in the medical profession, you have the Hippocratic Oath.
Yes.
You swear allegiance to whomever to make sure that you do your job to the best of your capabilities. And in some ways, I like the idea of that in journalism as well, that people, they know why they're doing it. But ultimately, you have to look at yourself and say, I'm doing this for the common good, which sounds a bit high and mighty, and I've never thought about it in those terms before, until I've started teaching it and understanding the philosophy behind it. And you can see it from the fact that, in autocratic societies, or even countries that are moving towards it, you can see leaders, how they try to undermine the journalistic profession. And they're doing it for one reason, because they know how important it is. And if they can get the general public on their side against the journalists, that's one step towards what they want, which is to not be held to account for the things that they do.
Yeah, I do think I want to kind of wrap up our conversation by saying if you maybe have any advice to communication and information students who want to pursue a career in journalism.
What I would say, go for it. I think it's a great career to have. I really do. And I look back over 30 years now, and what I have is a feeling that I enjoyed it. I'm glad I did it. There are moments within it that I did not like at all, but somehow, thankfully, it's like pain. You forget the pain, thankfully. It's like giving birth, I'm told.
Yeah.
It's horrendous, but you've got the baby, and you then want another one, because it's you forget about all the terrible things that happened in order for it to come out. And it's the same. It's the same with any profession. There are going to be bad moments, but overall, from my experience, the trajectory has been a very pleasant one, because you meet interesting people. Not just famous people, but lots of, and I don't like the word ordinary people. No one is ordinary. We're all fascinating in our own ways. But of course, there are moments that will stick with you that other people just don't have in their careers. You go to places, you see things that other people just don't see, because you go behind the scenes. And as I've said in class as well, I think, and again, I might be naive here, I think it allows you to see the world through a different lens. I think you understand the world, I'm going to say better, other people might disagree, but you understand how it works. You understand how it all fits together, and that's what's fascinating with journalism. You're paid to learn and develop and just see the world how it really is, and I've found fascinating. And of course, you meet fascinating people, and you meet famous people, and these are things that you will always remember. really extraordinary people just sitting next to them and looking into the eyes of these phenomenal individuals. Although at the same time you can also put it into perspective because you recognise that they're just still individuals, and 99% of the people that you interview are just, they are ordinary people, and the famous people as well, especially the celebrities, they're just ordinary people with huge egos. But there are some people, it doesn't happen that often, that are extraordinary. And you just see it in their eyes. There's such a something about them. And it's just like, wow, this is incredible. And just to be able to have moments like that as well, I think are lovely. But for those that are thinking of going into it, it's a great path. I think it's a great career to have, potentially. What society absolutely needs are people that are journalists and they know why they're doing it. They're having fun doing it, but they understand the principal concept, which is to give information to a wider audience. It's about empowerment. It's about knowledge, giving people an understanding of what's happening around them. Because ignorance is power to those that want it and crave it. And what's nice, as I say, you might be going, you're in journalism, you think, I'm not so interested in it, but there are so many different aspects to journalism. You can choose one that suits you. So yeah, go for it. Absolutely.
Oh, thank you. And so with that, I think I want to thank you for your time.
Okay.
It was really interesting.
Okay, well thank you. I enjoyed it.